tonight's topic is say yes more often. And what I'm really meaning by that is, how many times has somebody said to you, "Oh, what do you think of this new game?" I'll pick something out of thin air. Let's say Armada, because we've just been talking about it. What do you think of this new game Armada? And somebody goes, I don't like naval combat games, or I don't like fantasy games, or I've already got enough. I don't need to play anything else. And that's before you or anybody that we're talking about here has really got enough information about it yet. There's some kind of preconceived idea that you think at the back of your mind, I'm not going to enjoy that. And so you just say, no, I don't want to try it. No, I don't want to buy it. I don't want to buy the starter set. I don't want to go halves on the starter set. I don't even want a demo of it in days when you could get demos before the world went into lockdown. All them kind of things where you basically just, you think it's not a game you're going to enjoy. And I've done this a lot in the past. I've put myself off things like 40k. I've decided I didn't want to play a sort of Marvel Crisis Protocol is another example of a game where I keep looking at it and I think I should like it. I like Marvel, I like comic book characters, everything else, and I just go, nah, it's a bit expensive, it's not really for me. But what you're doing by saying no is you're potentially starving yourself of a gaming experience that it might be the very game that you've been looking for. Even when I've seen gameplay videos online of games that I think are not for me, and I've watched them and I've thought, yeah, that's just kind of told me it's not for me. I've then gone and played them and had a completely different experience. And some of those games, I probably go back. Warcry might be one of the first ones that I would put on this list. Because when Warcry was first announced, I thought, I'm not a big fan of AOS. I've been burned out on AOS. It's not really for me. I know the model that basically of the release model that I got from Kill Team, where I just kind of got burned out on the Kill Team, kind of like the fast-paced early release stuff, the complicated rules, not too complicated, but multiple dice rolls. The way it was 40k sort of esque, if you like. I didn't want that from an AOS skirmish game. AOS skirmish already existed. I wasn't interested in Warcry. And then somehow the rules were leaked before the release, which to be fair is probably a good thing that they were, because I then read those rules and completely changed my mind of what I thought about that game. Games Workshop don't release their rules for free, so I would never have really got to read the rules unless I'd bought a set of the rules and read through them. And I completely changed my mind. I did a live stream and I made a video about how I did a complete U-turn on Warcry. And Warcry now is one of my favourite games. If not my favourite, it's up there in the top 5 anyway. And I love the simplicity of Warcry. I love the release model of Warcry. I love the war bands. I don't like them all, but that's just purely taste. But if I hadn't sort of said yes to reading those rules, and from reading those rules, I then went to a local store and had a demo game of it on the pre-order weekend, I instantly was hooked. I knew it was the kind of game that I'd been looking for. And if I just ignored them and kind of went with my gut feeling that it wasn't a game I wanted, I'd have missed out on that. And it's happened to me multiple times, really, and that's really what I want to talk about tonight, is because if you are the kind of person that just says no and has those preconceived ideas about a certain game, you are missing out on some fantastic games. Other games I've done the same thing with is God Tier. I did a review recently about God Tier that said, could this be my game of 2020? Could this be the best game that I've played this year, like kind of new releases? It was a game where, when it was first announced, it was just another hex-based combat game. It wasn't something that I thought I was interested in. The models looked okay, but there was nothing that sort of potentially really grabbed me initially. Once it was released, it seemed to like come out to Kickstarter backers. There was very little talked about it. I never saw anything online about it. And the fact there was 2 starter sets, I wasn't really sure why there was 2 starter sets. I was confused by it, and the fact that there was a lack of noise, a lack of content about it, I assumed it wasn't a very, very good game. And if it wasn't for the fact that I got sent a review copy of it, if it wasn't for that fact, I wouldn't have played it, and I wouldn't have regretted not playing it. After getting that review copy and playing it and realising just how much I loved the game, I then went and bought somebody's all-in pledge, and I have everything for that game now, everything that's available. And that's how much I liked it. If it wasn't for doing that demo or getting that review copy, I'd never have picked that game up, and I'd have missed out on a game that I'm really enjoying. Another game that's on that list as well is Blitzball. VJ just mentioned it in the comments there recently. We've just been talking there in the live stream that I'm not a fan of Blood Bowl. I find the game quite frustrating. I find it's a game that really benefits you being good at it. So if you're a new player to the game and you're playing against somebody who's quite experienced, it's quite hard for that person who is experienced to tone down their kind of gameplay. They see, or it's a bit like chess, that they see the move that they need to make. They know the right order to activate their models in to make sure that they don't then basically kind of sort of end their turn and pass it over. And because of my sort of not liking Blood Bowl, I also thought I wouldn't like Blitzball. I assumed it uses the same models, it's essentially the same rules. Why would I like the same game on a smaller field, if you like, or a smaller board? And VJ has been a massive kind of proponent of Blitzball, how much he loves it, how much it's not like Blood Bowl. So VJ very kindly offered to play a game on Tabletop Simulator. He's over in Australia, I'm over in the UK. He got up at stupid o'clock in the morning to play a game against me online, and I absolutely love it. I knew within playing probably 2 turns, it was exactly the kind of game that I wished Blood Bowl had been. It wasn't that kind of... It still has the element of doing things in the right order, but it doesn't punish you for doing things wrong. You're not instantly punished for doing something wrong. It's not a negative play experience. It's less about scoring touchdowns, and it's more about doing things to score victory points from the cards, if you like, from the cards that come out. And again, if it hadn't been for VG offering to give me a game of that on Tabletop Simulator, I'd never have played it. And from that point, I was like, right, I need to try and get my hands on a copy of this. Luckily, Barry, who's in the chat tonight, lives over in the US, over in Illinois, and he's managed to get a copy from the US, and he's sending a copy over to me. So I should get that at some point in the future, in the near future, and I can't wait to play that. It's a game that I'm glad that I got the opportunity to play, and will get on the tabletop and be able to play those games and paint up some of those fantastic Blood Bowl minis that I wouldn't have bothered touching, basically, because I had no use for them. Another game, and the other one I want to talk about, is Kings of War by Mantic. For years I've looked at this game and loved the idea of those big battles and the big armies, and I talked myself out of it many times. I don't need a big 6x4 game. I don't need a big army game. I'll never paint all those models. It's not really the game for me. I didn't really like the idea of Warhammer Fantasy. My bias from seeing Warhammer Fantasy played at my local club when I was younger never looked particularly interesting. The guys playing it never looked like they were having much fun. They were constantly just kind of sort of setting things up and reading books. That put me off Kings of War. And after a period of time, eventually Kings of War 3rd edition was coming out, and I thought, you know what it is? It's kind of now or never. I'll give it a go. There's a local group kind of set up. They're playing more Mantic games now. I've got the opportunity to give this game a demo and try it out. And again, after about 2 turns, it was like, why couldn't I have gotten into this earlier? Why couldn't I have had a demo years ago and I could have been painting up stuff in the background like forever kind of thing? The game was nothing like I expected. Even watching battle reports online, because I was coming at it with a preconceived opinion of what I thought the game was like, I was almost looking at the negative stuff in it as opposed to looking at the positive stuff. Like, one huge thing that I've always said about Kings of War now since I've played it is that it's essentially, it plays more like a skirmish game than you'd imagine. Yes, you've got big ranks of kind of models, but you're moving around a big base. That big base might have 20 models on it. It might have 60 models on it, but you're essentially moving one big model. And it's about positioning of maybe 8 to 10 models, really, if you think about them as an individual model, those blocks. And I found it so much more interesting. And I actually found the rules probably more straightforward and easier to access than something like Kings of War Vanguard, which I'd found really fun. So what I found over time is that I need to say yes more often, whether that's a board game. Another good example is my wife bought me Carcassonne for Christmas one year. I'd never ever fancied playing Carcassonne. The artwork design on the front of the box did not interest me. It looked like a really heavy Euro game. The name didn't inspire me. It didn't fit like with any kind of theme that I like. She'd bought it. I couldn't go, oh, I didn't really fancy that, like, but thanks anyway. So we tried it, and I absolutely loved the game, and we played quite a lot, and we continue to play it. It's one of those kind of old, like, or modern day classics, if you like, for all the games being around for 20 years or something. It's like in that vein of like Monopoly. It's a classic. It's a game that everybody should sort of try and play. So if it hadn't been for saying yes and trying those things, I'd have missed out on loads of games. Now, one thing that cropped up in the Facebook group when I mentioned this thing for tonight was about sort of, yeah, well, that's all well and good, but communities are fickle, and you get into a new game and then nobody plays it. And there's a fair comment in that. I do understand that maybe you need opponents. But what I would say for me is, how much do I really play a game versus how much enjoyment do I get from reading about the game, from reading the rules, from reading the background lore about a game, from painting the models, from spending time online sort of shopping for the models and looking at the things that I'd like to buy and finding out the news about the game, about what's coming up, and generally just being around people online, in online communities with other people who love that game too. I probably spend a lot more time on that side of it than I'll ever do on the playing side. No matter, even if I play sort of once, twice a week, I'll still spend more time on all of the other stuff. So there is a point where you say, yeah, okay, like, I'm not going to play it very often, so I'm not going to get into it. However, as long as you're getting enjoyment from that product, if you only get to play it once a month, if you only get to play it once every 3 months, but you get a lot of enjoyment and you get a lot of satisfaction from painting those minis, from collecting those minis, from reading the lore in the background, from being part of an online community, there's still a lot of benefit to that. And especially in the current day and age, in our current climate where getting games face to face isn't so easy either, you kind of you change your hobby, you alter your hobby to get the most enjoyment from it. So just because you think you might not get as many games of that as something else isn't always a reason to say no. Sometimes just to feel involved in a game and be in and around a game is sometimes enough reason to say yes. I still want to do some kind of research and some kind of documentary type thing about just how often people play games versus how much time they spend being in and around the hobby, be that painting or reading or list building or theory hammering stuff out, or just talking online to other people who are like-minded. I think the playing portion for the vast majority of people is much smaller than we think it is, and that actually sometimes maybe how many games of it you're going to play might not be the best deciding factor. Maybe just the models being nice enough might be reason to say yes. So yeah, buy what interests you. Say yes. Try new things. Try new games. Try board games. Try card games. I encourage you to get demos, be that on Tabletop Simulator. If you can get to a local store, ask somebody, if somebody's playing a game and you like the look of it, ask them if you can have a demo. Just say yes more often, and you'll be surprised that there'll be games out there that you might just never have come across. You might just find the game that you've always wanted. Thanks for watching my video. I hope that you really enjoyed it. And if you did, why not consider clicking on the suggested video below to see more of the work that I've done. If you'd like to support the long-term sustainability of this channel, why not consider checking out my Patreon, where you can pledge and support from as little as $2 a month. And there is lots of different tiers and bonuses which will give you access to a private Discord server. It will give you free t-shirts, free mugs, a podcast every month, and a number of other things, including getting your name at the end of every video, like these awesome folks who already support me now.